Leo Vance, a bright, thoughtful 10-year-old with eyes that held a hint of inquisitive wonder, gripped the armrest of his first-class seat. This was his maiden voyage flying solo, a long-haul flight across the country to visit his grandmother in California. The past school year had been particularly challenging, a relentless stream of new concepts and complex projects, and the thought of Grandma's legendary chocolate chip cookies and endless stories of his dad's childhood was a welcome reprieve. He clutched a worn copy of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, its pages softened from countless readings, a familiar comfort in the vastness of the airplane cabin. His small backpack, meticulously packed with his favorite drawing pad and a few treasured action figures, rested by his feet. He had kissed his dad, David, goodbye just moments ago at the gate, their embrace a silent affirmation of love and trust. Leo still felt the warmth of his dad's hand on his shoulder, a comforting presence even in absence. David, the CEO of Vanguard Airlines' parent company, a man of immense success, was, to Leo, simply Dad, a figure of quiet strength, unwavering kindness, and a moral compass that always pointed true north. While waiting at the bustling gate, amidst the hurried goodbyes and boarding announcements, Leo noticed a young mother struggling. She was clearly distressed, a baby wailing in her arms, a diaper bag slipping from one shoulder, and a carry-on teetering precariously on top of an already overflowing stroller. Her face was flushed, her eyes wide with a mixture of exhaustion and desperation. Without a moment's hesitation, Leo, despite his own flutter of pre-flight nerves, walked over to her. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice small but clear. "Can I help you hold this?" He gently reached for a brightly colored patchwork blanket that was threatening to fall from the stroller. The mother looked up, startled. Then her expression softened into profound relief. "Oh, bless you, sweetie," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. Leo held the blanket carefully, offering a gentle, comforting smile to the overwhelmed woman, a small gesture that seemed to calm the baby slightly. This simple, spontaneous act of kindness was Leo's save the cat moment, a genuine display of empathy that solidified his innate goodness and immediately endeared him to anyone who might have witnessed it. He was a good boy, thoughtfully raised, capable of quiet compassion even when facing his own anxieties. The quiet strength and unwavering moral compass that defined David Vance, Leo's father, were not accidental. They were forged in the crucible of his own past. Leo had heard fragments of his dad's stories, hushed tales about unfairness and ignorance from a time before the gleaming office towers and private jets. He remembered David once telling him, while practicing basketball in their driveway, "Son, some people will try to make you feel small, make you feel like you don't belong. But you always stand tall. You know your worth. And you never let ignorance dim your light." David's own journey had been fraught with unseen battles, subtle slights, and overt discriminations that he rarely elaborated on, but had deeply shaped him. He had faced dismissal, been overlooked for promotions, and had seen his ideas subtly appropriated, all due to the insidious undercurrents of racial bias. Each setback, rather than breaking him, had hardened his resolve, honing his intellect, and sharpening his determination to create a world where talent, not prejudice, defined opportunity. He carried himself with a quiet dignity, a man who had proved himself against formidable odds, yet never forgot the sting of injustice. This subtle hint about David's past, his stories of unfairness, and the lessons he imparted to Leo about standing tall in the face of ignorance, served as the planting of a seed of mystery. It foreshadowed David's deep-seated aversion to injustice, subtly explaining the quiet strength and unwavering determination that would soon be unleashed when he was confronted with a direct threat to his son's dignity. It was the bedrock of his character, a powerful undercurrent beneath his calm exterior. The hum of the aircraft was a comforting lullaby as Leo settled deeper into the plush comfort of his first-class seat. He'd carefully buckled himself in, mimicking the flight attendant's demonstration with a quiet precision his dad always admired. The soft leather of the seat, the generous legroom, and the promise of a movie marathon before his nap were all part of the magical novelty of flying alone in first class. He opened his well-loved copy of Tom Sawyer, losing himself in the mischievous adventures of a bygone era. This journey, a gift from his busy CEO dad after a demanding school year, was meant to be a smooth, tranquil passage to his grandmother's warm embrace. He was looking forward to the tiny complimentary snacks, the unlimited juice, and the quiet freedom of being responsible only for himself. His peaceful anticipation shattered with the arrival of Flight Attendant Steele. Her presence was abrupt, a sudden imposing shadow falling over his reading. She was a woman in her late 40s, with a perfectly coiffed blonde bob and an air of crisp, almost brittle professionalism. Her eyes, a sharp blue, scanned Leo, lingering on his youthful face and the simple, comfortable clothes he wore. A graphic tee and jeans, perfectly appropriate for a 10-year-old on a long flight, yet seemingly out of place in her assessment of first-class passengers. "Excuse me, young man," she began, her voice cool and devoid of warmth, a stark contrast to the solicitous tones she'd used with other passengers. "There seems to have been a mistake with your ticket. You're in the wrong seat." Leo looked up, startled, his finger still marking his page in Tom Sawyer. "Mistake?" he asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. "No, this is 3A. My dad checked it for me." He gestured to the boarding pass tucked into the seat pocket beside him. "It says first class. Flight attendant." Steele's lips thinned into an impatient line. She didn't bother to glance at his boarding pass. "There's been a last-minute change. This seat is needed. You'll need to move to economy." Her tone left no room for debate, implying that his presence in first class was an error, an anomaly that needed swift correction. It was a direct, public challenge to his dignity and his rightful place, affecting him deeply and personally. His stomach clenched. This was the personal triggering event, a sudden, unjust disruption to his anticipated quiet journey. Leo, unaccustomed to such overt dismissiveness, felt a rush of heat to his cheeks. He was a polite boy, taught to respect adults and follow rules. His initial instinct was to comply, to apologize for an imagined error, and quietly move. He instinctively reached for his backpack, ready to gather his belongings. But then, a familiar flicker of discomfort, a faint echo of his father's lessons about fairness, made him hesitate. "Always stand tall, Leo. Know your worth." His dad's words, so often a gentle guide, now resonated with a quiet insistence. He knew his ticket was valid. He knew he was supposed to be here. This wasn't right. A wave of embarrassment washed over him. Other passengers were beginning to look up, their curiosity piqued by the exchange. He hated drawing attention, hated being a bother. He felt torn between his ingrained desire to avoid trouble, to simply disappear, and a burgeoning sense of injustice. He had every right to be in this seat. Why was she treating him like this? The confusion morphed into a subtle anger, a quiet indignation that slowly began to override his initial desire to retreat. This was Leo's initial internal conflict, a poignant battle between his innate politeness and a dawning realization that he was being unfairly targeted. Flight Attendant Steele, misinterpreting Leo's hesitation as stubbornness, became visibly impatient. Her voice, though still outwardly professional, hardened considerably, adopting a tone usually reserved for unruly passengers. "Young man, we are preparing for departure. This is not a request. You need to move now. If you do not comply, I will have to alert the captain, and you will be removed from this flight entirely." She punctuated her threat with a pointed glance at the overhead compartment, clearly expecting him to scramble for his bag. Her words were sharp, definitive, and public, delivered with an air of absolute authority that brooked no argument. Leo's eyes, wide and beginning to well up with unshed tears, darted around the cabin. He saw a few sympathetic glances, but no one intervened. No one offered a word of support. The threat of being removed from the flight, of missing his trip to Grandma's, was terrifying. But the injustice of it, the blatant unfairness, finally solidified his resolve. This was the point of no return. Flight Attendant Steele's escalating demands and public threat made it impossible for Leo to quietly retreat. He couldn't just move along now. The situation had escalated into a direct confrontation, forcing him to stand his ground, however small and frightened he felt. His small hand instinctively tightened on his book, a silent anchor in his suddenly turbulent world. The quiet boy who hated confrontation was now forced to face a looming battle, entirely on his own. Flight attendant Steele stood over Leo, her arms crossed, her expression a rigid mask of impatience. "Are you going to move, or do I need to call security?" Her voice, though not overtly loud, carried a sharp edge that cut through the low hum of the cabin, drawing the attention of more passengers. Leo, clutching his book, shook his head, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. But my dad said," he stammered, his voice small. "This is my seat." "Your dad isn't here, is he?" Steele retorted, a dismissive sneer touching her lips. Her gaze swept over Leo's perfectly clean, yet simple, clothes. "Look, kid, I don't know what story you cooked up, or whose ticket you've got, but this is a first-class cabin. This seat is for paying passengers. Legitimate ones." Her tone overtly implied that a young black boy didn't belong in first class, subtly questioning his legitimacy without outright stating it. Her body language was overtly condescending. She took a step closer, her shadow falling over him, making him feel even smaller. This was the revelation in an unwilling situation, as flight attendant Steele's prejudice manifested openly, forcing Leo to confront the ugly truth of her bias. Unbeknownst to Leo, and largely to flight attendant Steele, their escalating confrontation was not going unwitnessed. Just 2 rows back, reclining in his own first-class seat, was Mr. Sterling, a man of considerable wealth and influence in the tech industry. He was a frequent flyer, known for his brusque demeanor and a deeply ingrained sense of entitlement. He had observed the entire exchange, his lips subtly curling in approval as Steele's voice grew sharper. He'd seen countless situations like this. In his mind, children out of place, or people who didn't belong. He had a quiet, unspoken agreement with the flight staff on certain airlines, an understanding that standards should be maintained. He offered a subtle, almost imperceptible nod to flight attendant Steele, a silent encouragement for her to maintain her stance. His subtle support, though unseen by Leo, emboldened Steele, confirming her own biases. This man, with his quiet approval and underlying prejudice, was the antagonist, Type A, a figure of silent complicity driven by entitlement and latent bias. Further back, near the curtain separating first class from economy, a young flight attendant named Chloe, fresh out of training, watched with growing discomfort. Her eyes, wide and sympathetic, flitted from Leo's tearful face to Steele's hardened expression. She wanted to intervene, to offer help, but the rigid hierarchy of the cabin and Steele's known authoritarian nature kept her rooted to the spot. Other first-class passengers, now fully aware of the scene, exchanged uneasy glances. Some fidgeted, others pretended to read or look out the window, but all were subtly listening, their discomfort palpable. They were the selective witnesses, observers to an injustice they were too uncomfortable or hesitant to confront. "I'm going to ask you one last time," Flight Attendant Steele stated, her voice sharp, her patience visibly thinning. "Are you going to move, or do I need to make sure this seat is forcibly vacated?" She didn't wait for an answer. With a sudden, decisive movement, she reached down and took hold of Leo's arm, her grip surprisingly firm. "Come along, we have another passenger waiting for this seat, a paying passenger who booked first class." She began to physically try to usher Leo out of his seat, pulling him gently, but insistently. She made a show of scanning the aisle, as if searching for a mythical other passenger who needed the seat. Her action was clearly designed to make a scene, to draw more attention to Leo's supposed transgression. Mr. Sterling, from his seat, let out a soft, dismissive tsk, confirming his approval of Steele's aggressive approach. His action, though seemingly minor, fueled Steele's confidence, reinforcing her belief that she was doing the right thing. The young flight attendant, Chloe, flinched, her eyes wide with alarm. She could tell that Leo wasn't just being difficult. He was genuinely distressed, and the situation was escalating far beyond what was necessary. The flight attendant's actions were no longer about a simple seating error. They were a blatant display of power, an assertion of prejudice thinly veiled under the guise of policy. Leo, his small hand still clutching his book, resisted instinctively, his small frame rigid. He knew this was wrong, utterly wrong. He looked up at Steele, his eyes pleading, but her face remained cold, unyielding. The confrontation had turned physical, pulling Leo into a public spectacle he desperately wanted to escape, but from which he could no longer hide. the cabin's tension escalated, a prelude to the storm that was about to break. The first-class cabin, with its hushed luxury and exclusive air, had transformed into a suffocating box, a symbolic arena for Leo's burgeoning humiliation. The narrow aisle, usually a pathway to comfort, felt like a gauntlet. Every plush seat, every polished surface, now seemed to magnify the spectacle of a 10-year-old boy being publicly accosted. The confined space, meant to offer privacy, trapped the scene, forcing every passenger to be a captive audience. The soft ambient lighting, typically soothing, now felt harsh and unforgiving, spotlighting Leo's tear-streaked face and flight attendant Steele's rigid, determined posture. "Let go of me!" Leo cried, his voice a small, strained protest, his grip tightening on his beloved Tom Sawyer. He dug his heels into the thick carpet, resisting Steele's insistent pull. He felt a wave of nausea, a dizzying mix of fear and indignation. He looked desperately around the cabin, his eyes pleading for an ally, a kind face, anyone to intervene. But no one came forward. The other first-class passengers, though many wore expressions of discomfort and even disapproval, remained firmly in their seats. They averted their gazes, pretended to engross themselves in magazines, or looked out the window at the bustling tarmac. They were sympathetic, yes, but not brave enough to challenge the airline's authority, especially the formidable flight attendant Steele. Mr. Sterling, the older prejudiced passenger, merely offered another subtle, almost imperceptible nod of approval to Steele, a silent encouragement from his perch. Leo was utterly alone, a small boy against the imposing authority of a uniformed adult and the silent complicity of the elite few around him. This was the crushing realization of his hero's solitude, leaving him to face this public humiliation entirely on his own. A curt voice from the cockpit crackled over the intercom. "Flight attendants, doors to automatic and cross-check. Prepare for immediate pushback." The announcement was a stark, undeniable reminder of the dwindling time. Flight attendant. Steele's grip on Leo's arm tightened. "You heard the captain, kid. We are moments from departure. You will move now, or I will have you removed from this flight entirely. You don't want to miss your trip, do you?" Her voice was laced with a chilling threat, her eyes boring into his. She made a pointed show of looking at her watch, then at the cockpit door. 15 minutes. That's all you've got before we're pushing back. Make your choice." The added detail of the time pressure intensified the moment, transforming an already dire situation into an immediate, unavoidable crisis. Leo knew, with a terrifying certainty, that his time was running out. He had to make a decision, and fast. His small heart hammered against his ribs. The pressure was immense, suffocating. He could give in, retreat to economy, and swallow the humiliation. Or he could continue to resist, risking being forcibly removed, missing his flight, and disappointing his grandmother. The thought of giving up, of letting this woman's unfairness win, was almost as unbearable as the fear itself. He saw the smug satisfaction on Steele's face, the triumph in her eyes, and a fresh surge of defiance coursed through him. He remembered his dad's voice. "You always stand tall. You know your worth." He closed his eyes for a split second, trying to gather his courage. He was just a kid, but this wasn't right. It was fundamentally, glaringly wrong. The metallic groan of the aircraft as it prepared for pushback vibrated through the floor, a visceral reminder of the ticking clock. He imagined his dad, calm and strong, standing by his side. He opened his eyes, a new resolve hardening his young face. He would not be intimidated. He would not give in to injustice. Even alone, even scared, he would stand his ground. The true test had begun. The cabin buzzed with a low, nervous energy. Flight attendant Steele, her face tight with impatience, began to physically pull Leo from his seat. "That's enough. You're disrupting the boarding process. Either you move quietly, or we call the ground crew to remove you." Her voice, though a harsh whisper, carried far in the tense silence. Leo, tears now streaming freely down his face, clutched his book to his chest, his small body resisting. He felt the humiliating drag, the eyes of the other passengers burning into him. The injustice was a burning knot in his stomach. Just as he was about to be forced into the aisle, a voice, calm yet resonating with an unshakable authority, cut through the cabin, freezing Steele mid-action. "I believe there's been a mistake." Every head in first class swiveled towards the sound. A figure stood framed by the first-class curtain, tall and impeccably dressed, his presence radiating an undeniable power. It was David Vance, Leo's father. He had received a cryptic text from the gate agent about a ticket issue with his son, and his paternal instincts had immediately screamed wrong. He had dropped everything, raced through the terminal, and arrived just in time to see Steele's hand on his son's arm. He took in the scene. Leo's tear-streaked face, Steele's arrogant posture, and the smug, approving nod from Mr. Sterling in the second row. Flight Attendant Steele, her eyes narrowing, immediately adopted her dismissive tone. "Sir, you're not permitted beyond this point. We are preparing for departure." David ignored her, his gaze fixed on Leo. "Son, are you all right?" Leo, tears now of relief, simply nodded, a silent plea in his eyes. David then turned his attention to Steele, his voice losing none of its calm, but gaining an edge of steel. "My son has a valid first-class ticket, seat 3A, confirmed days ago. There is no mistake on his end." He then pulled out his phone, not for a photo, but to display a single, highly privileged screen. His executive airline dashboard, showing not just Leo's confirmed seat, but his own direct access to the flight manifest, and more importantly, his corporate identity. "And this plane," David continued, his voice dropping slightly, becoming a low, dangerous growl that seemed to vibrate through the floor, "isn't going anywhere until we sort this out." Steele glanced at the phone, then at David's calm, powerful face, which, until this moment, she had failed to recognize from corporate communications. Her eyes, which had been so sharp with judgment, widened in dawning horror. Her perfectly coiffed hair seemed to deflate, and the color drained from her face, leaving it a ghastly white. The arrogant sneer vanished, replaced by sheer, unadulterated terror. The realization slammed into her. This wasn't just a concerned parent. This was David Vance, the CEO of Vanguard Airlines' parent company. She had publicly humiliated the son of her ultimate boss. This was the breathless moment, the instant where all hope for the antagonists vanished, replaced by the chilling certainty of their impending downfall. Mr. Sterling, who had been subtly smirking, saw David's face in the phone screen, and his own self-satisfied expression crumbled into one of pale shock. David, his composure absolute, slowly lowered his phone. His voice, though still calm, now resonated with an unshakable authority that silenced the entire cabin. Every word was precise, deliberate, and carried the weight of absolute power. "This child," David began, his gaze sweeping from the petrified Steele to the now horrified Mr. Sterling, and then encompassing the entire first-class cabin. "My son, Leo Vance, has been publicly humiliated and unjustly removed from his rightful seat due to what appears to be blatant prejudice." He paused, letting his words sink in. This kind of behavior is not only unacceptable, but it is a direct violation of this airline's core values. As the CEO of Vanguard Airlines' parent company, I am taking immediate action. He turned back to Flight Attendant Steele, his eyes unwavering. "Flight Attendant Steele, you are relieved of duty. Effective immediately. You will be escorted off this aircraft by ground crew, and your actions will be subject to a full internal investigation, which I assure you will lead to your termination from this industry." Steele gasped, a small choked sound, her body trembling uncontrollably. Then, David turned his piercing gaze to Mr. Sterling, who visibly flinched. "And as for you, sir," David's voice was like ice, "your behavior in tacitly approving, indeed encouraging, this discrimination is a disgrace. You will also be removed from this flight, and your frequent flyer status will be permanently revoked. This airline does not tolerate such bigotry from its passengers either." The first-class passengers, who had watched the entire scene in stunned silence, now erupted. A ripple of murmurs turned into gasps, then quickly into applause. Several passengers voiced their agreement, expressing outrage at the injustice they had just witnessed. "Good for you," one woman exclaimed. "It was disgusting," another man added. Leo, tears now of profound relief and overwhelming love, scrambled from his seat and rushed into his father's open arms. David knelt, embracing his son tightly, stroking his hair. "It's okay, champ," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Dad's here. You did good." This public declaration, delivered with such quiet power and swift consequence, was a profound social vindication for Leo and David. It wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a clear, undeniable statement against systemic bias, witnessed and acknowledged by everyone present, solidifying David's absolute authority and unwavering commitment to justice. The immediate aftermath of David Vance's decisive intervention left the first-class cabin in a state of stunned silence, quickly followed by a murmuring wave of approval. Flight attendant Steele, her face a ghastly white, stood frozen in disbelief as two ground crew members, alerted by a discreet call from the cockpit, arrived to escort her off the plane. She offered no resistance, her carefully constructed authority having utterly collapsed. Her career, built on years of service, crumbled in mere moments, a stark and public consequence of her prejudice. She was promptly dismissed from Vanguard Airlines, and her license was flagged for a full review by aviation authorities, likely ending her career in the industry permanently. Mr. Sterling, equally pale and fumbling for an excuse, was also swiftly removed from the flight, his bluster dissolving into pathetic apologies. He was later banned from all Vanguard Airlines flights, and his frequent flyer status, a symbol of his perceived entitlement, was permanently revoked. The downfall of antagonist, Type A, Mr. Sterling, and Type B, Flight Attendant Steele, was swift and absolute, a clear message that such behavior would not be tolerated. David, however, wasted no time on vengeance. His focus immediately shifted to justice and systemic change. Even before the plane pushed back, he was on a secure line, dictating instructions. He immediately ordered a sweeping internal review of all passenger-facing policies across Vanguard Airlines. This wasn't just about one flight attendant. It was about rooting out any lingering biases within the entire organization. Mandatory anti-bias training was implemented for all staff, from flight crew to gate agents to executive leadership. A clear, enforceable code of conduct for passengers was established, empowering staff to address discriminatory behavior without fear of reprisal. A new, dedicated ombudsman office was created specifically to handle passenger complaints related to discrimination, ensuring every voice was heard and every incident investigated. The incident, though initially distressing, became a profound new opportunity for Vanguard Airlines. Under David's direct and proactive influence, the airline transformed. It launched a highly publicized Equity in Air Travel initiative, showcasing its renewed commitment to inclusivity. The media, initially drawn by the viral story of the boy kicked out of first class, soon reported extensively on Vanguard's swift and comprehensive reforms, praising David's decisive leadership. The airline's reputation soared, not just for its service, but for its integrity and its unwavering stand against prejudice. It became a benchmark for the industry, proving that a major corporation could and should prioritize ethics alongside profits. Later that day, after Leo had safely arrived at his grandmother's house and settled in, David called him. His voice, usually all business, was soft, filled with warmth. "Hey, champ, how are you doing?" "I'm good, Dad," Leo said, his voice clearer, the lingering fear replaced by a newfound confidence. "Grandma made cookies, and thank you for what you did." "You don't have to thank me, son," David replied, a quiet smile in his voice. "You did great. You stood your ground. And that's what truly matters." He paused, then continued, "You know, when I was your age, I faced similar things. Not always as public, but the feeling of being judged, of being told you don't belong, it stays with you. That's why I do what I do. It's why I built this company. So that no one, especially not someone as bright and kind as you, ever has to feel that way again. Always remember your worth, Leo. Always stand tall." His words reinforced the lessons from his past, connecting to the seed of mystery planted earlier, confirming that his fight was deeply personal, rooted in his own experiences with injustice. Leo listened, truly understanding his father's words, feeling a profound connection to the man who was not just his dad, but his quiet protector and guide. 1 year later, the transformation of Vanguard Airlines was undeniable, a living testament to David Vance's unyielding vision and swift action. The first-class cabins, once places where prejudice could subtly fester, now exuded an undeniable warmth and inclusivity. The very air seemed lighter, filled with genuine smiles and respectful interactions. David's company, the parent conglomerate of Vanguard Airlines, had not only weathered the initial storm of controversy, but had emerged stronger, its reputation as a fair and ethical leader solidified. Yet, despite his soaring success and expanding empire, David remained grounded, his integrity unwavering. He continued to champion diversity within his vast corporate holdings, understanding that true strength came from embracing all. His greatest satisfaction, however, stemmed not from financial triumphs, but from witnessing the profound positive change he had instigated within the aviation sector. Vanguard Airlines, under David's direct and meticulous guidance, had become a national leader in equitable air travel. Its policies, once subtly discriminatory, were now celebrated for their transparency and fairness. The mandatory anti-bias training programs had been so effective that other airlines now sought Vanguard's expertise. Cabin crews, gate agents, and customer service representatives, a diverse tapestry of individuals, were lauded for their exceptional and empathetic service. New initiatives, like dedicated support for unaccompanied minors and specialized assistance for travelers with unique needs, had set new industry standards. Vanguard had proven that a major corporation could, and should, prioritize ethics alongside profits, becoming a benchmark for the entire industry. Recognized not just for its operational excellence, but for its unwavering commitment to social justice. David's commitment to justice extended far beyond the confines of his corporate empire. He established the Leo Vance Foundation for Youth Equity, a substantial philanthropic initiative dedicated to dismantling systemic barriers for young people. This fund provided crucial travel scholarships for underprivileged children, enabling them to experience new cultures, pursue educational opportunities, and connect with distant family members without fear of discrimination or financial burden. It also championed comprehensive anti-bias training programs for service industries nationwide, advocating for widespread adoption of ethical practices. David became a powerful, sought-after voice on national and international stages, regularly delivering impassioned speeches at universities, corporate conferences, and global summits. His story, once a quiet personal struggle and later a public triumph, became a beacon of hope, inspiring a new generation of leaders to build businesses with conscience and to actively fight for a more just world. He was no longer just a CEO, he was a revered figure for social justice in the corporate world, a living embodiment of the principle that true power lies in uplifting others. One sunny afternoon, Leo, now a more confident and resilient 11-year-old, walked through the familiar gates of Vanguard Airlines. He was boarding another flight, this time with his father by his side, heading to a youth STEM conference. As they approached the aircraft, the automatic glass doors slid open effortlessly, a subtle symbol of the new transparency and accessibility David had instilled. Inside, the first-class cabin hummed with a quiet, welcoming efficiency. A diverse, smiling flight crew greeted them warmly, recognizing Leo not as the boy who was kicked out, but as a valued passenger and a living symbol of the airline's renewed commitment to equity. Leo settled into his seat, a new, uncreased copy of Treasure Island, resting in his lap, a symbol of a fresh chapter, free from the shadows of past injustice. He glanced at his father, who gave him a reassuring smile. The cabin was bathed in bright, inviting light, reflecting the airline's transformation and the lasting legacy of David and Leo's stand against prejudice. It was a future built not just on profit, but on profound purpose, a testament to their strategic foresight and an unshakable belief that even the most ingrained systems of prejudice could be dismantled and rebuilt, creating a legacy of opportunity and dignity for all. Their lives, once defined by a moment of public humiliation, now shone as a guiding light, proving that justice, when pursued with unwavering resolve, always finds its triumphant dawn. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming narratives that delve into the profound human spirit and the power of unseen heroes. Thank you for joining the journey.